Hello fellow stitchers, I'm going to talk to you today about a project I've been working on since last semester, and I feel like not only is it really pertinent to a lot of topics right now around fast fashion and how we intentionally use the things we have, but I really hope that I can give you tips I learned along the way that will help you on your journey to either stash busting or just thinking about your wardrobe and refashioning it, restyling it to work for you. Hello and welcome to Bookhoarding by Bianca. I'm Bianca and today I'm going to talk to you about the Upstyle challenge that I've been taking part in as part of my schoolwork and scholarship work. The Upstyle Academy Upstyle Challenge has been part of my City College of San Francisco and Macy's scholarship program that I've been participating in since the fall. So today I just want to talk a little about the project, show you the finished result, which I'm really excited about, but also just give you an idea of the challenges and tips that I encountered along the way. I personally feel like the way forward in terms of sustainability and conscious consumption is us sharing and giving each other these tips and not hiding them behind paywalls. So here's a little background on my school project. Basically, in the fall, one design student and one merchandising student were teamed up, and I got a big bag of samples from Macy's, and my challenge was to refashion this into something, a full garment, a full outfit, that is going to be shown at a Macy's in my city. There are a lot of other requirements around this, like bullet point lists of things that each student is responsible for, but I just feel like instead of getting the nitty gritty, I just want to talk to you about the actual process because I feel like that's the most helpful. So in terms of upcycling and upstyling, which I think some people either use interchangeably or differently, I would like to make a little bit of my own personal definitions. I feel like upcycle pretty much means we're taking any kind of material thing and making it into an upstream thing. We're remaking a product. I think when we're referring to clothing, it typically means you're refashioning or creating something out of a different material, or you're creating like new textiles out of something, but you're basically taking something that I think otherwise would have been waste or thrown away or past its usage, and you're putting some effort and creativity into making it useful again. That can range from, taking prom dresses and revamping them for the new age, or, doing fun t-shirt projects where a t-shirt has a rip in it, so you make extra rips and you make it all cool and artsy. And in that vein, I think upstyling can refer to doing that on a different level, if you will. I think specifically for fashion, to me, it feels like that can mean I have an outfit that doesn't really work for me. I will use my skills in terms of sewing and design and patterning to remake this into something, refashion it into something that I will wear, if that makes sense. So while I think sometimes upstyling can sometimes mean, updating something from one season to another, I think that overall a lot of these things are part of upcycling, right? It's thinking about ways to keep this stuff out of the landfill. And I think too, thinking about these terms and trying to either create a better definition in our communities, because I think some of these are used across communities, or even in the spheres of influence that we have, is really important, especially with the amount of greenwashing there is. And greenwashing is just people slapping these terms on it and they're not actually doing anything to change structural problems. So when you see these terms used, I think the biggest thing is, especially when you're seeing it from big brands, looking at where are they actually being transparent about that process, who is doing it, what is actually happening. I actually put together a really long blog post about this. Upcycled Fashion 101 is on my blog, which I will link in the description, but it has everything from tips on how to spot greenwashing to also accounts to follow that are, I think, really, really good and really, really helpful in terms of constantly focusing on the issue around fashion and textile industry issues right now. So here's a slight overview of the process of design and creation from me in terms of this project. And this is not the end all be all. This is just how I went about this with some tips along the way. First, I went through the garments that I had and got a good look at the materials and the size of the pieces of fabric. I literally made a spreadsheet that had all of the information on the materials down to the fiber content and size. Pretty much took everything on the sample cards I put into a spreadsheet so I'd know. So I would say when you're doing these projects, think about the things that are really inspiring you or that you feel comfortable with. I have done a lot of costumes that were actually upcycled, curtains or thrifted sheets, or even massively refashioned dresses that I would find. So for me, this wasn't necessarily as scary as other things, although it was a little scary because this is a scholarship competition and I only have the materials I was given, right? Think Project Runway and making the cut. I also have a partner that I really don't want to let down. But since you will probably not be doing this for a scholarship challenge, take it easy and really think about things that inspire you. My overall tip, which I think you know if you watch my design video, is make a Pinterest board, make some kind of inspiration space that's specifically, here are the things that I'm really like thinking about that I would want to wear. Or if you're making it for somebody else, what they would want to wear. So identifying styles that you feel really comfortable and confident in, and then being like, what of those things makes the most sense for either the season that's upcoming or the materials I'm using. So the way I approached this was, I know that I don't have a ton of materials in this to make like a ball gown, right? I just have sample pieces and a lot of them were children's or toddler sample sizes. But me and my partner also agreed that we wanted to make a size 16 garment because that is the average size of people in America, and why not? Because if you don't make fashion, either upcycled or refashioned, anything accessible, what are we doing? If we build structures around faulty like guidelines, then we're never going to get back to where we need to be. So let's start off with, we want to make this accessible, so we're going to go for actually trying to make this a representation of a real person, which is in itself a challenge if you're given a lot of small clothes. But it's not impossible. So knowing that I needed to make a garment that would fit a size 16 person, I then looked at the samples that I had and thought about what materials would work. Because I do, again, have a lot of children's clothes. So thinking about what do I have enough materials of that I can also put together that would be complementary to each other or go into a kind of look or style. Me and my partner decided to go for a kind of fairy tale, silky look. And I think it really worked out well. So I think Seelie is like if Silky did Bridgerton, Regency-y things, but also it's really mostly for fairy tea parties, let's be real. And who doesn't want a fairy tea party? So after I identified the pieces in my bag of samples that I knew I wanted to use, I then took to taking them apart. I have another blog post that has a lot of tips on doing this, from seam rippers to X-Acto knives, razors to electric razors. I would say the biggest tip for taking apart garments that are already made, that are off the rack, is a lot of things are going to have a surged seam. So my big tip is you need to gauge if you either need that little ½ inch on each side, quarter of an inch, whatever is left. You need to gauge if you need that little bit of fabric that's surged or if you can just deal with it. While you can definitely seam rip a surged seam, some fabrics are going to be too delicate for that to work really nicely, and it might mess up the seam regardless. Alternatively, there might be seams that it's really easy to just go through, like jeans, other things like that. Those are fairly easier, I'd say, to just seam rip and it'll be intact. But I was working with a few materials that were thinner, so I decided instead of seam ripping all of those, I would just cut really close to the seam along one side, so one side would just lose that seam allowance, and I just would deal with that. That's a choice I made, and I knew that I had enough materials to cover if I needed that little in between. So I decided to make a bodice corset top and a really cool, interesting yoked skirt with ruffles. I think that you'll recognize a couple of historical-ish silhouettes here. The bodice is very much inspired by Baroque and honestly 1830s kind of cuts, because I knew that I need to have a lot of seams. And I guess that's a tip, right? Because if you look at this and where the seams are, I made sure there were a bunch of seams in both of these pieces. Because when you're working with things that don't have a ton of like yardage, you're not working with yardage, you're just working and hoping that things will work out, you don't have a lot of wiggle room there. So I knew that if I did do anything, I should just make multiple pieces and then try to match the grain line as much as I could. I personally say that grain lines when you're upcycling things are aspirational. Be really, really conscious of little things. Like I was working with corduroy, and if I didn't have enough corduroy, I might have had to make some things kind of do an interesting like cross hatching thing where some of the lines would be this way and maybe other panels it would be this way. Luckily it worked out for me, but I think thinking about those things, because not only do you need to make use of your materials, but I do think there's an opportunity for style choices. The skirt, I made a yoked skirt that had a pleather top, with pockets made from a child's t-shirt, and then the bottom was made from a blue summer dress. I also think a challenge in this is reminding yourself that you should be trying to scavenge the notions and hardware from pieces that you know you're going to tear up. So I used a zipper that was on, I think, the child's jacket, but I did supply like a grommet and one of the closures and some grosgrain. But there are 100% ways to just use the things that you have. Like, you know, I tore off a bunch of buttons and I added a button for the purse. Speaking of the purse, I think this is a classic upcycling project. I used the scraps from all the things I'd worked on after I was done. There's parts of the bodice fabric, there's a bunch of the lining, there's a little bit of everything in there, and I think it worked out pretty cute. My favorite touch on the purse is that I used the straps from the child's corduroy jumpsuit, whatever, as the straps for the purse, and I even had like a little button on there so it would just button into it. I also put in a jean pocket into the thing, denim that I'd used for other things I put in there and sewed it in, so it was a natural pocket. In terms of your own clothes, there's ways to do visible mending or color blocking, any of those really cool things. You can upcycle a worn down, you know, button up into a cool apron. You can weave scraps into a totally new textile. I mean, I quilted scraps into a totally new textile, right? Anyway, so those are some of my tips for the process. I think the biggest thing is just being really patient with yourself, especially because you have limited materials to work with, unlike a lot of other sewing projects where you have yardage left. I think the biggest thing too is overcome the fear of, because you have limited materials, it can't be done. It can be done. You just need to be confident and a little bit creative and also open to that creativity. So here is a look at the finished piece on my lovely model Latoya, and then here are a couple of other photos of me wearing it. But I think it turned out really great. I definitely feel like a big challenge is working with materials that I was not prepared for. I don't typically work with a ton of stretch materials, and pretty much all the materials I had were stretch. Even the cotton things had some spandex on them. And I honestly think the biggest challenge for me in looking at any of the clothes that even I have that I'm like, how would I upcycle my own clothes, is the materials. Because there's tons of knits and things like that that I have some experience in, but I don't love making those things. So I think figuring out a way to upcycle those things, or even to explore more technique that gets me more comfortable with using those materials, is a, you know, future thing for me. So we've talked about the project, I've given you an overview of my process, and I hope this was helpful. I know that I didn't go into a ton of details around large parts of this project, but I do hope that this is at least enough to get you excited and inspired to do some exciting creative work on your own. And if you haven't been following along, I am hosting a year-long stash buster. You can find the link in my description down here. I'm sure there will be a video up here, but basically I'm just doing a year-long intentional use of my materials project. And I welcome anyone to join me. And it's not like it's going to be a test at the end where it's like, how many projects did you finish? How much did you stash bust? Did you only use materials you had at home? None of that. Like, I know that I'm gonna have to buy some materials for upcoming school projects and garment things I need to do for a other scholarship, but that's fine. I think that just being aware of what we have, taking note of it, is the first step toward figuring out how we then can better use it or remake it. Anyway, my scholarship is due probably maybe about the week this video is coming out, but I hope that I get to talk more about it. Crossing my fingers that maybe I win, maybe me and my partner get to celebrate. I mean, we'll celebrate regardless. But in the meantime, do check out my Patreon and my Ko-fi. Leave me a tip. Remember that as a patron, you get special access and early access to all my projects, and Discord server, the Jane Austen Avocado Toast Society, where I do post previews of my upcoming stuff and in process updates there. That was a long sentence. That didn't make any sense. I don't care. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget to make it so.